Hello, everybody, and welcome to the crash course in working in tech in government. We're going to have fun together today. And surprise! Everything you might have heard as a constraint or a problem is actually a superpower. And we're going to talk through a bunch of examples and intentionally save a bunch of time for questions. We know that you will be confused, and it's an opportunity to dig in together.
And so a little bit of housekeeping, a few norms for you all. So we're recording, you heard that come up. We have questions and answer open. We have chat open. We have a ton of folks who are experienced government tech folks who are here to hang out as well. And they're there, so they may be responding to questions as well. And we encourage you to please share your own perspectives as we go through this, because we are by no means the only folks who have ever done GovTech, and by no means the folks that know all the things in this space. And the only thing we ask is that you do so in a respectful fashion, and we respect each other in the dialogue. So please use all those options, the Q&A, the chat, and please, we'll be monitoring them throughout as well. And I'd like to also have two of our team members, Najela and Haley, introduce themselves as well, because they will be helping us moderate and monitor the chat as well. Haley, do you want to start with your intro?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Haley Ponte, and I am a student analyst at the Beeck Center, working with Cori.
Hi, everyone. My name is Najela Nakuna. I am a current grad student at the Kennedy School and the MIT Sloan School of Management, studying sort of the intersection of data and policy.
And we're so lucky to have you both with us. All right, and who are we, Cori?
Hey everyone, I'm so glad to be here with all of you today. My name is Cori Zarek, and I spent 8 years working in government at the National Archives and at the White House. I was the Deputy U.S. Chief Technology Officer, and now I'm at Georgetown University, where I get to continue working on these issues and work with amazing young folks like Haley.
Hey everyone, I'm Kathy Pham. I came to government for the first time in 2014 after spending about a decade in the private sector at places like IBM and Google and other places. And I'm so grateful that I found my way into tech and got to work with amazing people like Cori, Erie, and so many others who taught me so much about tech in government. And I'm excited to be here. Erie.
I am Erie. I have worked in a variety. I've worked at the state and federal level of government, from either a tech or a policy or a tech and policy team. I've had the honor of working with Cori in the Office of Science and Technology Policy, and Kathy, the United States Digital Service. I'm just currently a Fed, doing stuff unrelated to making government work better, but still related to tech at the Federal Trade Commission.
And we would love to get to know all of you. There are an awful lot of us at the moment, about 200 and some, and so we don't have time to go around and do proper introductions. But if you would like to introduce yourself, drop your name into the chat. Make sure you select panelists and attendees so that we can all see. Let us know who you are and maybe where you're joining us from, geographically speaking. And if you have an affiliation you'd like to share, an organization you work with, we'd love to know that too. So please do drop in a little hello from all over the place. We want to know who we're with today. Dr. Salik Ahmad from Kashmir, that's exciting. Folks from California, India, Colorado, Mexico, very exciting.
Oh my gosh, and please, as we're talking, share stories and examples from where you're at too, where, you know, we clearly know a lot about the US, but there's so much around the world, both in parallel as well as differences. And just from the, the form that you all filled out, you all are here for just a variety of reasons. Some are really interested in how to get work done in government. Some are interested in just building a community. Others some of you are early career undergraduate, fresh out of college, looking for ways to get into government. And so I think we'll cover some of that today, but also really excited to build a community around this. There are about 600 plus of you who are CP'd. And so we're hoping this could be a really starting point to continue to build a whole community around this as well.
Welcome. We are so glad to have you. So yes, keep the introductions coming and let us know throughout if you have questions or if you have contributions to add. As Kathy said, we know what we know and you all know so much more. So feel free to drop that in as we go.
And why are we here? At one point, there was a photo of my little brother, who is a United States Marine, on here. And I know he really, I think, motivates me to do some of the work in government, but I also realize that's not the only story, right? We all have so many reasons why we care about government, why we care about government tech, and whether or not we know anyone who has ever had to use a government service. We all have our own reasons for really caring deeply about making sure government tech work. And I think that's why the 5 of us are here. We have some experience in our time, either building out new organizations in government, leading tech and policy in government, starting up entire new entities that have never existed before across the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the White House, Office of Science, Technology and Policy, Federal Trade Commission, et cetera, with experiences ranging across the private sector to long-term government, and everything in between. And so we're here to just share anything that we might have learned.
But Kathy, why did you decide to join government?
I was, as Erie likes to say, minding my own business with like hanging out in the private sector. And the United States Digital Service popped up. And I think the important thing to know about USDS is there's a story of why it became an organization back in 2014, but it was really the work of a lot of people for many years trying to bring tech into government. And it took a big tech failure and a couple of things to really, I think, make that happen. But for a long time, a lot of people did a ton of work to lay the foundation for launching things like 18F, USDS, the Presidential Innovation Fellows Program, so many others, Code for America before that, et cetera.
Kathy. But your story is important.
It's important, but I came because so many people had, or why do you think I came here?
Kathy came to serve her country because she was working at Google in a variety of different things, and she was really interested in healthcare. And may I reference your mom?
Yeah.
Her incredible mother had cancer, and as she thought more about health data and what was possible, she realized a lot of it was happening in the federal government. So she figured she'd give it a try, tried out for a few months, and then immediately got addicted to service.
That really was why I came, but it's much easier for someone else to talk about you.
All right, next slide.
Yeah, there's so many things you can work on here in government and tech that affects both your personal lives and things at scale. So
one last thing for the previous one is please tell us why you're interested in working in government in the chat while we're here, because we're super interested. So what have you heard about working in tech and government? I'm going to look for responses in the chat. What could be rumors, could be a thing a friend told you about what it would be like to be here. Cobalt, yeah.
Is the norm.
Yeah, Cobalt is the norm. No promotion opportunities. You have to wear a suit. It's slow. So much stakeholder management, limited resources, dedicated people but not set up for success, red tape, old tech. Like these are all of the things that you hear. Lazy civil servants.
We're going to dive into so much of that.
Nepotism. Yeah, every single one of these are things that I've heard too. Will you go to the next slide? It's actually very cool. And so, a lot of folks, the first thing they hear about working in tech, in government, are these barriers, these stereotypes, these expectations that are on the actual floor. But in many ways, working in tech, in government, is an extraordinary opportunity that doesn't exist anywhere else. Somebody once said, how can you say you're revolutionizing healthcare if you don't work on the largest healthcare system in the world, which, for those of you who know, is the VA's health system. So it is, every place has different constraints, but it's extremely, extremely cool to work in government in tech. Oh, I think folks all of a sudden stopped being able to see the slides. Oh, others can see the slides. Okay, never mind. Let's go to the next.
All right, we're gonna keep it moving. So wanted to ask someone in the audience who we know is kind of chiming in on the chat. So I'm gonna ask Sherry, who looks like she's affiliated with Victim's Voice. Sherry, I'm not sure where you're joining us from, but could you just drop into the chat, what's the weather where you are? Sunny and cool. Sherry, what's the temperature? What's cool? All right, 50 degrees. Thank you, Sherry. Now, if we could see Sherry and ask her, I would ask her, how did she determine that? She might have looked out a window, but I'm guessing she might have just grabbed her phone and checked real quick just to see what the temperature is and what the actual weather forecast is. It's something a lot of us do every day. Apple Watch in a window, thanks. And as we kind of start our days, especially in ordinary times when we were leaving the house more regularly, it's, just one of those things you do. You kind of check the weather and see, do you need an umbrella? What's going on outside? And many of you already know this, but the data that our weather apps use is powered by open government data from NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. The fact that NOAA has been releasing weather data for years and years has actually led it to build a giant multi-billion-dollar industry around data. Entire entertainment sectors like the Weather Channel now exist, both to inform and entertain with weather, and it's all based on open government data, which is pretty cool. So we're going to switch gears as we move through the next little bit together. Keep your questions coming, and we're going to dive deeper into a number of topics, some things that might be perceived, as Erie said, as challenges or limitations, but we've learned there actually are superpowers. So we're going to keep this light, we're going to keep it fun, and we hope that this will be as interactive as it can be as we go. All right, so on the next slide, we're going to go a little bit deeper into open data. This image here is a weather map from the Smithsonian. And back in the 1800s, this weather map was updated every day based on reports that came through to Washington, D.C. by telegraph, showing what was happening all around the world. And then folks at the Smithsonian, maybe like these individuals, would hang up little colored paper all around the country to actually demonstrate whether it was cloudy or raining or snowing. And this was really our OG open data at work. Open data is important, and it's such a critical driver of a lot of what we do in government and technology. It drives decisions around our important policies. We do a lot of, we've increasingly focused on evidence-based policymaking. And data also fuels the digital services and all of the services we deliver to the American people. So many of you are used to working with data, particularly if you're technologists or thinking about coming into government. Data is, something you do and work with every day. But you might not be used to publishing that data in the open. And that is a very important part of our process. It can feel a little daunting. Your data might be incomplete. Your data might need cleaning. There are always challenges with data. That's totally normal. But publishing our data as open data is amazing. It allows for incredible industries to be created, like the weather data industry, big weather. It allows for all kinds of other innovations and creativity through the entrepreneurial sectors and students and folks all around the world. And we have over the years developed a number of policies and practices and even laws that now that support and encourage open data use and sharing. And so it might be a little bit of a switch to get used to publishing your data in the open, but it is such an extraordinarily important part of how we work in tech and government.
So on to the next thing. This is a real sign that I saw one day, and it left me with questions. And what's sort of hilarious about this, and the reason why I think about this all the time, is this is a private business, and it was actually totally fine for them to weirdly put up a sign that said, "Please, no questions." Next slide.
So I know some folks are having trouble with the slide. So if you couldn't see the slide, it was a very hastily magic markered sign written on paper that says "Hotel closed, please no questions." So Erie encountered this, while she was minding her own business. And because it's a private business, a hotel, there's really nothing you can do about it. And that is one of the greatest things about the concept of open public records and freedom of information in our government. So not just our data is open, but our records are as well. And we have the ability to get information and answers from our government. And it can't just put up a sign that it's, closed, no questions. So data is open, and any records that we create are also by default considered to be open and public records. So when you're working in government, the emails you write, the text messages you trade, any records you create, whether it's a memo or some kind of policy document, or a video recording, or photos, illustrations, your notes in your little notebook while you're working in government, all of that is presumed to be public. It's all public domain, and there are a number of exceptions. We can talk about that offline or later, but the presumption is that what we do is open. That can feel overwhelming when you're coming from a place where what you do is your own business. And on the first, when we were getting onboarded at the White House, our lawyers would sort of ease us into this by telling us not to put anything in writing that we wouldn't want to see on the front page of the Washington Post. No big deal. Just imagine that every email you send could be published in the Post. Felt a little dramatic, but it's honestly good advice. When you work in government, you work for the American people. It's an awesome responsibility. And it also means that the American people are essentially our boss. We'll come back to that. But anything we do should be with a mind toward openness and transparency and accountability to our stakeholders, the people who you're in government to work on behalf of, and who in a democracy have a right to access information and records about our work. You'll hear about the Freedom of Information Act, FOIA, and you may want to joke that it's a horrible 4-letter word, but it is really great, and it shows that we have a healthy democracy when we can work openly and provide access to our work in the public.
Whoops, I was muted. So another piece of that open part is what we build, we own. So for those of you who are in the private sector, when we build something, it belongs to our companies. There are all sorts of laws around that. In government, oftentimes what we build, we can share with each other. So what one agency builds, we can share with another agency. The standards we write with stuff we build in government is shared pretty much broadly around the US, around the world. So one of the examples I love to think about that I think pretty much has inspired most of my entire career is thinking about how the United States, the Veterans Affairs, built the first ever electronic health record system back in the 70s. And that was before we can discuss the merits of electronic health records separately and their impacts on the health industry. But this idea that the government can build a piece of technology, make it open, and make it so that anyone around the world, wherever they are, can use that piece of technology to help monitor, track, care for patients. And then people in the private sector can take that and improve upon it and do whatever they want with it. But we have that power in government. We have that power to build a piece of tech, write software, and not only have it impact the many millions of people who interact with our government and people, not just the citizens in our country, but anyone who interacts with our government from outside, and have this cascading effect, right? That is so powerful. And for someone like me who's worked in healthcare tech for so long, to know that the government can be this huge convening core of place where code starts. And that's not what we normally think about, because the way I was trained, everything was out, you know, in tech in the Bay Area, and that's where things happen. But if we really look, the government has so many examples of when we build stuff here, it has this deep, broad cascading effect. And yes, Mark pointed out GPS. Yes, that's another great public resource. There's so much stuff that's built and arguably really only can be built in government that affect and has a cascading effect to so many places. And please share your favorite examples of that too, because I know I get inspired every time I think about how you build tech in government and have it used pretty much everywhere. Your neighbors.
So part of what's neat is that while when you work for a private firm, you may have a CEO, you might have a board. Has anybody, and feel free to add in the chat, ever had a board member who had like kind of a goofy idea, but it was like a pet issue and you sort of had to like work on it because I guess like the board, so a random person on the board thought it was a great idea. Part of what is glorious about working in the government is you're working for your neighbors. We get to work, I like, so these are not my neighbors. This is my mother and my grandmother on her 90th birthday. If you go back one slide. And they are both adorable. And when I'm building something, when I'm working on something, I don't have to worry about somebody's like bizarre idea of a pet project. You really get to focus on the taxpayers, the members of the public, the residents of your community, you're literally the people next door or the people that you love.
Here, you want to kick us off with this slide too?
Yes, so the gentleman you see here, his name, which I pasted below, is John Seward. And so you might not recognize him. And feel free to paste in the chat if you have a favorite long-term govvie. One of the things that happens sometimes is people come in and say like, oh my gosh, like, you know, these people have been here for decades. How am I going to do my fancy tech stuff? And da, 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 da. This gentleman worked at the Department of Justice for almost 30 years and was credited with fundamentally changing how the financial industry lent money to minority and underserved communities. And it was because of those decades of experience that he was able to see not just like a whack-a-mole problem, but to really look at systemic change to fundamentally improve how something worked. So don't let, in some of the assumptions we had at the beginning, folks said that, you know, long-term, I'm now doing your whole slide, Kathy, I apologize.
No, please continue.
Some of the folks said that there's, you know, some assumption that the folks who've been there for a long time like don't know something. They're your superpowers. I highly recommend literally finding the person with the longest tenure at your agency and begging them to get coffee with you, because they will see problems on a level and opportunities on a level that you could not imagine in your first mere 10 years in government.
Yeah, and to add on to that, I definitely, when I came in, there was a lot of like the, woo, you're gonna bring all your tech skills into government. And there's a lot of hype about that part, or like hype about bring private sector skills into government. And sure, that's fine. But I think the more important part is, yes, come with your skills, whatever they are, and find those people who, whether they've been there for 6 months longer or a year longer or 20 years longer, who just deeply understand how the bureaucracy works, which servers you can deploy to, who owns what machines, who maybe literally has to turn on and off a machine every night. Like all these little things impact how much we can get done, and we can move so much faster when we honor and respect those folks who've been around for a long time. And I'll probably mention this later as well, but who will just, I think, teach us all about, you know, what it means to be in government for a long time because you deeply care about wanting to serve people. And that's something that may or may not exist in private sector companies. And yeah.
I want to chime in on this one too. Sorry, before we move on. So I came into government at the National Archives, which is primarily a civilian agency. There really aren't political appointees there. So the staff are there for their careers, and many of them work there their whole careers. And so it was really interesting to come into a place, having been outside of government and having had my own biases about government workers, particularly long-term government workers, and quickly realizing that, first of all of my theories were dead wrong. And that I kept finding more and more incredible people, to Kathy's point, who wanted to make their life's work in public service. And they came to government because that's where they could have the most impact. And we expect that's probably one of the reasons, some of the reasons why a lot of you are here as well. You realize that the impact you can have in government is incredible, and it's a scale like no other. And so as I continued kind of poking around the archives and other parts of government, I was just always so impressed and amazed to uncover these incredible long-term career civil servants who absolutely were there to deliver as best they could, and were often just constrained because bureaucracy or limited resources or leadership that wasn't giving them air cover or buy-in, right? You know, we've seen that happen all throughout. And so as you all consider coming into government, I think what we want you to take away from this is find those people, get to know them, understand how they work, why they work, and what we can learn from them, and ensure that we are bringing, all working together and kind of bringing everyone along with us. Your private sector talent's really valued and it's wonderful, but it's nothing compared to what we can learn from these folks who've been there forever.
All right, so one of the things that our dear friends who work in the tech industry have to do sometimes is to organize to get transparency into salaries, for example, and people have faced really serious retribution. There's also sometimes workers have to really fight in the private tech sector to get equity considered as something other than an employee resource group that is like underfunded and not listened to. The federal government is not perfect on workers' rights, but all of our salary data is public. All of every single federal agency has to collect equal employment opportunity data and report it up by race and gender. It's a huge opportunity that would otherwise be something you'd have to fight and scrape for. The infrastructure is actually built in. And one of the examples is USA Jobs. USA Jobs is not my favorite website in the world, but part of what's interesting about federal government hiring, and part of the reason it can feel so different than what you're used to if you're coming from tech, is because they place an emphasis on fairness. And what I mean by that is if you apply to Ask Jeeves and you have on your resume that you went to Stanford, they may decide a bunch of things about you that are probably true. When you apply to a federal job, you have to say what your specific experience actually is. And they don't assume, it is explicit in the hiring process that they do not assume a bunch of things about your background because you went to Stanford. Shout out to Stanford. There also are built-in pieces of infrastructure for everything from unions in the federal government to internal staff whose whole job are to support you and to make sure that you are able to avail yourself of the rights that are here, as opposed to my friends at a startup who will say things like, I just found out I'm pregnant and I know it's against the law for them to fire me, but we don't even have an HR department, so I can't figure out our parental leave. The federal government has this very clearly laid out, and it's actually a really interesting difference that you get in the federal government versus the private sector.
Another thing that's very different is a different category of lawyers that you'll get to encounter. And lawyers can sometimes be blockers. And as a lawyer myself, I know that's a role that lawyers play. However, lawyers are also there to help us. So in ordinary times, if you have a job outside of government, you are getting invited to all kinds of cool things, speaking events, conferences, parties, receptions, baseball games, concerts, super cool. We are so excited that you are awesome and you get all these great invitations. And when you are not working in government, your company might have rules, but mostly you get to do what you want. Golf, yes. But when you are working in government and you get those invitations specifically as a government worker, so when that comes for something in your professional capacity to speak at an event or attend a conference or travel somewhere to do the same, or to attend a reception or a ski trip, or I'm trying to think of some of the random things we would get invited to in government. That's great that you get those invitations, amazing. But the process is a little bit different. And so when you get invited to events, activities, et cetera, your agency will have an ethics process that usually involves the lawyers and your supervisors and comms people and others. And the process is there to protect you, to make sure that you're not putting yourself in a position where your integrity or your well-meaningness can be compromised, and it makes sure that you're doing your jobs in government without favor toward any one organization, and with your agency keeping a lookout for these outside entities that are asking for government people's time. They can track this in the aggregate because there's a lot of us, and the ethics lawyers and ethics review teams can also help make sure we're not getting taken advantage of by people who might want to influence policy or otherwise kind of get some kind of inappropriately. And then when your participation in an event has been cleared, you can confidently say that your counsel has confirmed that it's appropriate and ethical for you to participate. So win-win. And it's a slightly different process than you might be used to, but it's definitely a good thing. And the lawyers are there to protect us.
And if you, to Cori's point, if you invert it, how glad are you that the people who are doing things from approving vaccines to, working on health systems have attorneys who make sure there's not even an appearance of corporate or lobbyist influence. It's taken really seriously and it means a lot. I won't say every administration has lived up to my wildest dreams of ethics, but I will say that the fact that the infrastructure is there and everyone is not kidding about it means a lot.
So there's the ethics lawyer ethics, and then there's your own ethics. There's a whole book written about this called IBM and the Holocaust. It's not to be taken lightly. It's this idea that as a government, we can buy technologies or we can build technologies that on one hand may on the surface seem like, oh, we're just doing a census. The US has also used this machine. We're just tracking people. Oh, we're just tracking Jewish people. We're just tracking certain types of people. And the kinds of implications that can have as we think about how we use that information. We see examples of this around the world. And I think it was important for us to put this up here because when you work in government, you can bring your own ethics to the table and you can help decide what's built, what's not built, and how things are built. And you can be in the room to make those decisions instead of now just only be on the outside wondering why our government's building what it is or isn't. And this is true for policy as well, right? When you come to the table, you can also help make the policies. And at some point, the policy and tech also gets all woven with each other as well, where sometimes tech influences policy, policy influences tech. And I think the big takeaway for all of us who've now been in government is that when we're in the room, we can really help decide what gets built or not. And that was a big thing for me coming as a software engineer, product manager person from the private sector into government to see that we had that ability to really influence what our government can build. Cori, Erie, anything you want to add to that?
You may be a builder. You may be the kind of technologist who's going to come and build things and may make some decisions on what you will and won't build. You may have a different kind of role. You might be helping collect information, or you might just be an ordinary government worker who has philosophies on what types of policies outside your area of expertise or your area of work are okay. And it's important. I think we call this out because it felt important to us. And I think we all had our own kind of moments of this and conversations with each other about it at a time. whatever that is, whatever that line is, whatever those policies for your own self are, it's important to set those out and be true and accountable to yourself for the choices that you make about what you will and won't work on, and be willing to make changes or take bold steps if you need to in order to be true to yourself and hold your ethics at heart.
The Inspector General.
All right.
Inspectors General, yes. Oh, good. Did you want to add to the ethics, Erie, before we get into IGs?
Nope.
Okay.
No.
All right. So Inspectors General, every agency has an independent unit called an Office of Inspector General. It truly is independent, and it's basically the auditor at an agency who can take an objective look at what's going on and then publish a report that includes usually recommendations meant to help your office, your unit, your team in government get better. It's a great resource and a great process that we have in place, even if it feels a little bit scary to be letting in these inspectors who are going to come in and ask all sorts of questions and review all kinds of records and actually point to areas that do need improvement. When I was in government, we really relied on Inspector General investigations to help us. We knew where we were falling short often, and we knew why that was. Resources were limited, or there were bureaucratic barriers or blockers in our way. And by being open with the IG's office, they could actually publish that and have an objective accounting of the things that needed to get fixed so that we could do our jobs. And the Inspector General is part of the executive branch agencies, and there's a similar role in the legislative branch called the Government Accountability Office, or the GAO, which performs a similar auditing function. So these are, again, like these are individuals or offices that might feel like they're trying to constrain you or hold you back, and yet it can be an incredible superpower, because when you show them why you can't do what you were supposed to do or why these different things need to change, they're actually in a position to call that out. Their reports are public, and they can help you kind of demand a better situation for carrying out your missions and getting stuff done.
So one of the things that's framed as like a big, bad, scary thing in the government is congressional oversight. You know, make sure Congress doesn't ask about this. No one talked to Congress. Oh my goodness. But it's actually awesome to have congressional oversight. Congress typically has people in it who really want your agency to work well and to serve people. The GIF I have here is of Congresswoman Katie Porter, and she's questioning the head of the United States Postal Service. It's extraordinary that we have, again, like they're not your board, but this is another place that can help push your agency to do an even better job. So I would say that in an orientation, they will probably scare you about Congress and be like, don't ever meet any of them. But I would encourage, as you build sort of your squad of people who support you and challenge you, make friends with staffers in different offices, ask them about, you know, how it works and what it does. Consider a stint in Congress, perhaps after your executive branch service, because they are working really, really hard to help the things about our agencies come true. I would recommend, if you're thinking about working in an agency or about to start working in an agency, you can even look up the most recent oversight hearing and you can hear what they're asking about. So these folks, Congress sounds scary, but this is kind of like the Investigator General, another body that is typically advocating for you.
Erie, something that I think surprised me that I didn't know coming in was that the moment you have a .gov email address, even though there's definitely silos everywhere, you now can also like reach out to someone else with some .gov somewhere else, whether it's Congress or another agency, to be like, hey, I have thoughts. Or, hey, do you just want a few thoughts? And I now no longer am with some other, you know, big tech company or whatever. I'm not external. I'm here also as another government employee. How can I help? And when you're internal, you're in the house, even though it's a really big house of all government, you can really influence that way as well. You can help influence, you know, how different folks in Congress think about some of tech, whether or not you're actually in Congress.
And Congress is amazing because it is also really working to up its game on data and tech and digital capacity. So a bunch of folks have mentioned Tech Congress in the chat. That's a great organization that is deploying technical talent into congressional offices and committees. There are lots of really great opportunities to get involved with Congress. If you're considering public service, that branch is very ripe for more tech talent and energy to come in and sort of help ensure that we are building up all of our government capacity together.
Cori, since you're a resident lawyer, I think this question is important. Are there ethical issues with emailing a congressperson from a government email with personal opinions?
That is a great question, and I'm so glad you asked. So another feature in every government agency is an Office of Congressional Affairs. This is an office that sits in the leadership level of your agency, your TBD agency, and they are the main point people to liaise with Congress. They're not meant to be gatekeepers necessarily, although maybe sometimes, but what they do is just ensure there's like coordinated communication with Congress so that like every single government employee isn't just like sending random emails. So I think Erie's point was a great one. Build relationships yourself, get to know people in the future state when people are physically back together in Washington, D.C. You're going to meet lots of people, and they're going to meet people on the Hill, and they're going to be your friends. They're going to be your neighbors, and you're going to get to know them. You'll have plenty of ways to connect. You'll meet some of them professionally, and they'll ask for your professional input and your professional opinion, and perhaps help drafting bills and otherwise considering what to ask in congressional hearings and things like that. That just totally happens. It's normal. And those are the instances when you're a government employee where you're going to want to coordinate with your Office of Congressional Affairs. Just be sure that they're looped and that they are tracking this type of engagement and making sure you have the ability to provide your expertise and consider how to make sure Congress is also best positioned to help govern and support the work you care about.
And to make it super concrete, if you go to your government affair or your congressional affairs office and say, can I email like a congressperson, they're going to be like, what are you talking about? Absolutely not. An opportunity would be, let's say you're working on, this is real, when we were working on the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, people were complaining about foreclosures that weren't fair. Turned out that a bunch of people were complaining about foreclosures to their congressperson. So we worked with our Congressional Affairs Office to choose a couple of offices in Congress to be our beta testers of a government referral system. The Congress people on the board that had oversight over us were great people to know exactly how useful our services were. You can also reach out to them to help find users across the country. So if you need somebody from a weird neighborhood in Topeka to test this thing because there's a zip code that's throwing an error message, if you go to your Congressional Affairs Office and say, hey, this is weird, but Congresswoman Zarek represents this district. Would it be okay if I contacted their constituent services office and see if they had anybody who had this issue in Topeka? That's somewhere to go. So also, like, bless their hearts, individual Congress people are like not actually, I mean, bless their hearts. The staff are the people who do all the work. So this is not the place where you give your impassioned speech to Katie Porter. She's amazing, but like her chief of staff, her legislative director, her constituent services people, these people are working every day to make government work better for the people.
All right, thanks, Erie. Your first week, we thought it's so important for us to really talk with this idea of thinking about who to reach out to as experts when you first come into government, especially for those of you who are not from government, that we have a few slides on this. I wanted to tell you all about my first week and also talk about in general the first week. I got really lucky. I came to DC. I was living in California, and my first week I was in a room like this, and that's a picture of Erie in the back, and the USDS headquarters still looks like this at 736 Jackson Place in Lafayette Square, right outside of the White House. And I sat down, I was terrified. I had never worked in government before. And I was at the table with Erie, Vivian Grobard, Molly Ruskin, I think Haley Van Dyke was there as well. And they were just interweaving stories of their favorite eateries in DC with like memos to the president and strategies around building up digital services inside USCIS, so the US Immigration Services, and thinking through the new team they were going to build at the Veterans Affairs, which Erie helped start. And it was just so incredibly powerful to hear these experts just talk about, who've been in government a little bit longer than me, in some cases much longer, just talk about how things were done in ways that were just so, for me at that time, really foreign, of like memos to presidents to get things done, like executive orders, and even just a hierarchy of what was even a deputy secretary or secretary. All these words that were just, for me, really foreign at that time, which seems really trivial and silly now, or like, what is even the OMB? And like, and you know, I knew there were 3 different branches of government, but other than that, I didn't know. And so it was so powerful just to sit and listen to the way folks spoke, to the language, and to spend that time to just really understand how things work around us. And that's what the people who've been there for a while. Again, it could be people who've been there for 6 weeks longer, 6 months longer, years, decades, who really can be our guiding light in this space, and to leave any kind of hubris at the door and how much I knew, how much we knew. And even if like we're told, you know, you're here because you have all these skills and we love you so much, which was basically what Erie was doing with all of us. Like, we're so excited you're here. You're so smart. We're so great to have you. And really they're the ones that know so much about how things work. And so those first few weeks, thinking of that almost like a personal discovery sprint of sort, to just listen and see the language that people speak, to see what's really broken, how things get done, and just to learn how things work are immensely powerful, and finding those people to help us do so.
Your first week is also going to include all of the things. So you're going to get a million forms to fill out. I don't know, maybe some of them are digital now, but you're going to have to sort of onboard in all of the ways, and it'll probably be a little more intense than you're used to in the private sector. There's a lot to it. And there's also a lot kind of coming at you in orientation in more formal settings. So it might be a conversation around a conference table in the basement of Jackson Place, but it also might be a big board meeting with dozens or hundreds of other people who are starting at the same time in a government auditorium, with kind of slideshow after slideshow after slideshow from central leadership. And it will probably include some of the topics that we raised here. So you're going to get a little bit of intro to ethics. You're going to get a little bit of background on the Freedom of Information Act and the fact that you're creating open government records. You're probably going to get an orientation to the HR and EEO processes and things like that. Probably going to get a lot of information that will just be a lot at once, and you'll kind of forget about it. And so one piece of advice in that first week is just make sure you go back and revisit some of those topics, and or make a note to grab a coffee or find someone who can dive deeper into it with you so that you can really understand why it matters. There is a reason that all of those things come at you in your orientation, and they can, again, be your superpowers and not your constraints.
Yeah. Thanks, Cori. I also, I think this can maybe fit here. I've seen a few questions now about, quote, non-tech backgrounds advancing in government tech. And I think what I really want to raise on that is I'm going to channel Mina Shang, who often will say, technical isn't binary. You're not like technical or not, right? And this is from me, who has 2 CS degrees and was a software engineer. You don't need a, quote, computer science background to be either technical enough to understand how to lead in GovTech in government, and to learn enough to be really a good leader in various groups, and to really help with various tech teams as well. That's a much bigger discussion to be had, but I think it's important to just mention that here. And government teaches us. This was really important for me to put in here. I was really floored when I actually left USDS after about 3.5 years, and somebody outside said something along the lines of, there's nothing that the private sector can ever learn from government. We just have to bring private sector skills to government. And and this was actually someone who hadn't ever done that work. And I remember being so floored because anyone I know who came into government without the government experience to do tech came away learning so much that really enriched whatever they did next, whether it was to go back to the private sector, teach, stay in government, etc. We learn, we sometimes are told like bring your skills in, but actually we come in and we learn so much from government. And that seems so obvious now. And I think it's silly to even sometimes have to say it out loud, but there's so much that working in government, whether it's the deep respect for designing for all people who interact with government services. There are no edge cases. You are there to serve everyone. People who deeply care about the folks of the agency they work with, people who deeply care about the veterans they work with, the military women and men they work with, the people who need housing, the people who are trying to get their family members into the US who work at the Department of Homeland Security, et cetera. There's so much we learn coming here in terms of designing for really, really large groups of people and designing for everyone that I think is incredibly special and very unique to government, and also the scale of government, right? The scale is so large. Yeah, of course it's hard. It's larger scale than pretty much any startup I've worked at. I worked on Google Search at one point, and that arguably reaches billions of people, but the scale of what we design for in our user base is unlike anything else. So there's so much we learn from coming to government. It's almost like if you only purely view it as, I don't know, another version of grad school or something, you come and you learn so much about building really large, complex, ridiculously hard tech, policy, people, human systems that that you'll just, I think, take with you wherever you go. I know I did. Anything else to add there, Cori and Erie? I think we're gonna wrap up soon anyway.
No, just start popping your questions in the Q&A system.
Yeah. So Gov Crash Course is what we wanted to use as a hashtag in case folks wanted to share your own resources for other people to find later, and then just to put stuff in Q&A as well. We have about 30 minutes left, and we really want to use this time to have a conversation. I wish we could somehow be in an actual room and talk to each other. And so we'll try to mimic that the best we can in this weird virtual world.
All right, guys, so I've been taking some notes here, and I think I wanted to start us off on a couple of themes for questions that I saw coming in. And so one is around skills. What are some useful skills that folks should think about highlighting? We talked about the difference in a government resume and the government hiring process. What are skills we not only should have, but we should also think about playing up if you're applying to work in government? Don't all jump at once.
Oh, sorry. I thought. Wait, sorry. I was going to chime in.
Reading the questions. I wasn't. Sorry.
A couple of things. I actually think there's groups of people working on this as well, various skills to bring in, and I think this is just going to vary for everyone you talk to. Like some people are going to come in with their deep engineering skills and they're going to hyper focus on that, and that might be enough. But I think what usually happens is, regardless of what your background is, whether it's design or product or engineering or anything else, we all end up doing some version of strategy and policy and stakeholder management, and having to figure out, like, let's say you're like, all I want to do is write code. You're like, cool. But did you know that in some cases, you have to literally sign a piece of paper for a code review and code submission and code change? And so have to figure out that part in addition to just writing code. It's a different, I think, kind of skill set. So to be able to pivot, and I think it really takes on a different meaning to be agile and iterative. You really have to be agile because you're presented with scenarios that you probably just haven't dealt with before. So those are a few things I think of when I think of coming in with a engineering or product background.
The other thing I'll say is some people showed up and they were he will remain nameless, but a like very important contributor to Google's Android platform. He was like the king of Go, like da 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 da. And he came in, and I don't think he got a computer issued to him for 6 months. So it's not like it's so great you know how to code, bless your heart, but like we've got some like bargain basement things that need to get fixed sometimes. So don't wait to apply until you've acquired a particular skill. Applying now and let us decide what is most useful. But I don't mean us, I mean the government.
Thanks, those are good questions. And you know, while we were trying to really show how in this conversation, some of the challenges that are just very, very real can be superpowers, we, you know, we know that some of these things really are challenges, and that you may be bringing skills, you may just want to pop your laptop open and code all day long. It might actually be a challenge for you that really isn't what coding in government looks like. So just to kind of play up what works and what works well, and consider how to lean into that. That's really what we're hoping to get across here. We had another series of questions around training and kind of professional support. And so when you come into private sector jobs, there's often a lot of training perhaps built in, especially if you're in a big company. How does that work for continued training and professional development opportunities in government?
For me, I would say that like do not expect to get finance to go to different conferences. I will never forget the look on my ethics team's face when I told them I needed $300 cash to go to DEF CON in Vegas. They were like, I think you're getting scammed. It's fine. So it's really self-directed in the federal government. There will be like formal professional development things, but it's like weird like project management certifications typically. And if you're trying to sharpen your technical skills, one of the very special government professional development opportunities are details. So the NSA is not my favorite mission of government, but for example, the folks who work there who might not love the mission, love to go work at agencies where they can just help people for a little while. And they consider it professional development to go and like help make something more clear, easier to use, or more reliable. And you can do that. You can get detailed to different agencies, but there's not like, you know, it's very self-directed.
Good point in the chat. Money is weird in government. And yes, $300 is a good deal for a conference. One of the tricks is you can't pay your own way to go to conferences, events, or activities using your government affiliation. So that whatever it is, $300 cash or plane ticket or whatever it is to get to your conference actually has to be approved and come from public funds when you're representing your public sector role. So makes it a little bit tricky. One thing, and a few folks in the chat have dropped in resources, and I might ask them to just re-up it. Professional development and training and support around this kind of emerging service delivery field and digital government field is still really new. IT has been around for a very long time, but a lot of what we've worked in and around and a lot of what we care about is a little bit different. And so those resources are still coming together. There's an effort that a couple of folks in the chat I saw are helping to lead to capture and document the professional development resources we have. So look for more from Betsy Cooper, who's with the Aspen Tech Policy Hub, and Jen Noina, who is actually on our team at Georgetown, and some others who've been trying to document what's out there just so we know, and so that we can start to address and fill in gaps where there are needs and opportunities for more mentorship and coaching and professional support, because not only are the opportunities kind of few and far between, but then it's also actually really hard to get to them when you are in government. So we'll call that out as something we really all need to work on.
One of the questions I saw in the chat, I'm just going to quickly answer live, is around money. I think, so the top federal employee for like a not executive is like $156,000. So it's not nothing. And I think people are sometimes surprised to hear it can be that high. Those are often set by your job history. So if you are coming off a job where you made $500,000, you will be asked to submit paperwork that shows that, but you will typically immediately get topped out at, for example, GS 15 step 10, which is government speak for sort of the top non-executive pay scale. Also for student loans, there are a bunch of benefits for federal employees, like student debt forgiveness, public service employee student debt forgiveness that is only available to folks who work in public service. So don't immediately decide money is going to be a disaster. And again, like, salaries are public. If you find something interesting, like, go look what it actually pays.
I will chime in on that to say that I have student loans. I had 6 figures in student loans when I left law school. I went into public interest work for the first part of my career and then public service after that. And it's a daunting thing that I've carried with me. So just very transparently, it really stinks. However, I have figured out how to make it work. Unfortunately, I didn't qualify for any sort of agency level public loan support or the public service loan forgiveness for all sorts of reasons. And we know that those programs, while they exist, are actually really hard to get into and could be really problematic. So real talk, don't necessarily expect that to be something you can tap into, although in some places you can. And also real talk, you can make it work. It could be challenging and you might make other trade-offs and other choices, which I definitely did, but it is doable. So just kind of know what you're getting into and what sort of tolerance you have for those trade-offs.
One of the questions I saw is the difference between USDS and 18F versus like a career position at an agency. At USDS and 18F, you will be surrounded by like a nucleus of people who understand you. If you go to an agency, someone will ask you to fix a printer. I don't care what you do. I don't care what division you're in. Someone's going to be like, my Ethernet isn't working. And so that will not be your whole job, but you will have to fight really hard in a traditional agency to get folks to like understand and think through. Just a personal story, I work at the Federal Trade Commission. A case was announced this week that is big. When I first started, folks were kind of like, but you're not a lawyer. And I'm like, but we're talking about how like a service interface affects competitive markets. Have you written an API? Like it's not that people are stupid, they're just not used to having those kinds of skills there. So if you have a low tolerance for explaining why like you're part of the team, I would recommend 18F and USDS to start. But you also get to go deeper and spend more time in an agency working just on a specific mission area. So like USDA is in charge of food benefits. Like that's so cool. Go work at USDA, and you can also make space for more people to join you and build your own nucleus. Kathy, what do you wish you had done in your first 30, 60, 90 days?
I think something that I still think about at the time I left is that every moment that we're in government is really precious because everything is urgent. And I think I kind of knew that going in, but as time went on, that really, really, really became evident, where I think in the private sector, there's a lot of like false urgency all the time. And I think a lot of us struggle when we leave government, when there's like a deadline, you're like, okay, but like the ratio of like urgent feeling you have to the actual deadline isn't really the same as government, where we had real urgency, whether it was working on appeals for veterans or electronic health record systems between the Department of Defense and VA, or the amazing work at Department of Education with Lisa Galopter and Erie U and Sabrina and others around getting information for colleges to students. Like, there's just, everything is urgent because people are relying on us all the time for these services. And I think going in, that's a thing that I wish was really stressed, that the moment you're in the door, everything you work on is really important, and to treat that as real urgency.
Got a couple more questions around the intersection of technology and policy. And so like the tech policy work that happens in government and what skills you might need or what backgrounds are most helpful for that. The good news is that tech policy is happening all throughout government in all sorts of different agencies. And so even if you may not have a long history or great deep expertise in the free and open internet or privacy or security or something else, you can get in an agency like the Federal Communications Commission or the Federal Trade Commission or other parts of government where you can start to learn technology policy issues really kind of from the ground up. If you do have domain expertise and there is something you've been studying or writing about or working on and is kind of your life's work, then great, we love that too. And there are lots of opportunities to work on that type of technology policy in government as well. The White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, naturally, is the home for a lot of tech policy work in government, but from the White House level. But it's also, as I said, it's really happening throughout government. So there's a lot of great ways that you can apply your technical background and policy awareness and experience into what you do. And I think one thing that a lot of our colleagues who joined, I came from a policy background, a lot of our colleagues, maybe like Kathy and others who came from more of an engineering or other traditional technical background, maybe didn't realize they would also be thrown deep into policy and would get to be making policy and implementing policy and driving policy decisions in their work. And so that actually is a really integrated part of the work, even if you may not have necessarily a policy background, which you don't necessarily need.
I think that just really goes back to, we haven't said this yet and think in this session, but you'll hear people say often just show up. Because when you're in the room, even if you're like labeled the digital service expert, which is the actual real title for anyone who joins USDS, that's the title, not like software engineer or product manager, just a digital service expert. You might end up,
You made it up.
we did make it up. Like a lot of things in government end up being made up, it turns out. But you're in the room now. So like Cori said, you may be weighing in on something over at the Office of Science, Technology and Policy, or like the president has some meeting and they're like, oh, you know a thing about this tech thing. So just come to the room. I'm about to put out an executive order. I need your opinion. And so being in the room oftentimes, because you're there and you showed up, now you're the voice that folks go to. And that's really, really important. Linda's a CIO, so she may know this answer, but what's the pay difference between exec and non-exec roles? Cori, do you want to take that? I assume
There's a system called the Senior Executive Service that has a slightly different pay scale. It's boring. There are not typically federal government jobs that will pay millions of dollars, but this is, again, something that's special about government, that it's publicly documented in a beautiful way. So if you literally ask Jeeves, what different pay scales in government, they will outline it all. The Senior Executive Service just gets so complicated. It's like not the most useful thing to voice over. Kathy, I saw a question that there's been a trend in government, in the tech industry, about folks going fully remote. Do you think that will happen in the public sector? Oh,
I actually think either Kat or Mark or Chris, or maybe you might have a better answer because you're currently in government. I know, because mine's speculation. I think folks are home now, right?
Yeah. I'm not allowed in my building. I have to get a special form approval if I want to go in my building. I mean, I would say, don't let it be a barrier for you to apply, because right now every federal agency has, as long as, depending on your role, if you're working on the physical building, you can't do it remotely, but like any job where you would normally just be sitting behind the computer is remote right now. I would say apply, and then like the VA has offices all around the country. The General Services Administration, which is where 18F is, has offices all around the country. And I've seen agencies do extraordinary things to keep great employees, even if they didn't live in DC.
Yeah. Erie, question for you. Chris Kang asks if we could share some reflections or thoughts on diversity, equity, and inclusion in civic tech and public interest tech. And there's another question along these lines as well about, I think I saw somewhere, about kind of culture and building these inclusive teams and environments. And how are we doing and where do we need to go with that?
I would say lovingly that it is a trash fire. And what I mean by that is that just like any workplace, we are a reflection of society as it is today. And I would say any time where you see things framed as, we need a program, a pipeline of, we need this diversity initiative, as opposed to a fundamental examination of white supremacy and systems of power in the structure of the space, we're not having the real conversation. So I would say like the laws are in place and the policies are in place so that we could have real equity in these different teams. But, and I will put in the chat, I did a blog post about what I think are table stakes in the American federal tech government movement. I would say bargain basement are things like, we're not having all white people panels anymore. I see all the time, like literally like recruiting initiatives, which God bless, that are all white folks. Like, and again, like, who cares about panels? But the fact that that could be proposed and approved and like go forward and be like a fancy thing is a pretty good reflection of where values are. So by trash fire, I would say I expect a lot of our community, and I expect a lot of us. And I think that there's a lot more to do, but I would say that leaders like Cori, leaders like Kathy, are great allies in us figuring out how to fundamentally reshape those systems.
Erie, Michael asked this question. I think it'll be good to reiterate what you said earlier about jobs. He asked about not having a college degree and how does that affect USA jobs? And I just think it's so important that you bring that up earlier.
Yeah, so USA Jobs sometimes does have really specific weird degree requirements. So you need to have a PhD in like oceanography of blah, 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 blah. Like that's real. At places, I think at 18F, I'm not certain, but I'm like 90% sure at 18F. And I'm 100% sure at USDS, we specifically did not put a college degree as required, specifically because you don't need a college degree to serve at USDS. And we had multiple people who worked there who never went to any sort of college, not an advanced degree, not even an undergrad degree. And I put in the chat, we even had folks who didn't finish high school. So they eventually got a GED certificate, but are still like brilliant engineers or brilliant designers. At 18F and USDS, folks are primarily interested in what you can do, not what your family had money to pay you to go to.
And a related question around formal collegiate education. So does that matter? Does it matter to have a particular advanced degree, or does the credential that you have matter, and how much might that help? I will also answer this one a little bit directly. As I mentioned, I have a law degree and my job in government at the National Archives was as a lawyer. So I needed that in order to get that job. When I came over and joined the team at the White House, that didn't come up in conversation. Where I went to school didn't come up in conversation. University of Iowa, go Hawks. But what they cared about, to Erie's point, is what I had done, what I could do, and what I would do, and how I work, and how I can demonstrate the GSD quotient, right? Getting stuff done. And that was what really mattered. So yes, I can't say that the privilege that I had of having a formal education and having an advanced degree hasn't helped. It certainly has gotten me into rooms and has probably been made note of in lots of ways. But I think there are also a lot of moments I noticed where no one asked, no one cared, no one would have known, and that it was very much about the work and how we showed up to do the work.
I just asked Nigella if there's any, and Haley if there's anything we missed in the Q&A, because it's hard to follow all of them sometimes. There was a question Chris had asked about, I think I lost it, our reflections on, I guess, diversity, equity, and inclusion in government, and how hiring looks like. I think what I really appreciate about that one is something Erie said earlier, is that yes, government has all these like checks and policies and things that sometimes makes it harder and longer to hire, but also makes it so that it's harder for teams to discriminate and has better checks than perhaps other private sector entities. Erie or Haley, Erie or Cori, do you have anything to add to that?
No.
Thanks, Chris, for bringing that up.
Yeah. One question I saw was around a gentleman who's a co-founder of a tech company, and what are the implications of coming to work in government. So whether you own a tech company or you work at a tech company, it depends on what you're doing. So if you came to my agency that regulates tech companies, you would not be able to work on the team that is regulating your company. Sometimes, depending on your position, you will have to divest stocks. All of my investments, which LOL, very small, are in index funds, so that I'm not, buying and selling based on industries we're looking at. So this is part of what is wonderful about the ethics lawyers, is that they are so good at this. They're so thoughtful. They've dealt with it a million times, and they can answer really fantastic questions. So unless the tech company you founded is something that will be pitching government work back to you, it is typically not a big deal, but it's different for each situation.
And I found
don't let that be a barrier to apply.
What I also found refreshing, because I was like, oh no, all these conflicts. But then when I actually started talking to the ethics lawyer, they understand the nuance too. So let's say you work for an agency, and part of that agency, or even part of your team, works on a project. As long as you're not directly on that project, it's okay. So it can even be the person sitting next to you is working on this, but unless you're actively on that and your conflict is against that, then it usually is okay. And they ask that you disclose in all these forms.
Great question in the chat about side hustles, if you will. So if you work in government, let's set the conflicts aside. And so let's presume we've gone through an ethics check and there's no conflict. Can you work on a freelance basis on the side? Could you, this isn't the question, but could you serve on a board? Could you volunteer in different capacities? The answer to all of these things is most likely yes. The whole time I was in government, I taught as an adjunct professor on the side. Got paid for it, not much, but that's okay. So I did have freelance work, paid freelance work, but I had to get that approved by, again, our friends, the ethics lawyers, and they reviewed those positions every time. For me, it was annually, but anytime you'd have a new thing, they would review that. I believe that some folks do, kind of small scale freelance writing projects or consulting projects or other types of teaching and things like that. I'm sure there are lots of other examples here that folks can offer. And then related but separate, maybe it's not paid, but can you serve in a personal capacity on the board of directors for an organization, volunteer groups, et cetera? And again, the answer almost certainly yes, but those are things you disclose to your agency through this annual form that you'll fill out, and they just sort of keep track of these different things. But yes, you will work it out with your ethics officer.
One of the questions I see is it easier or more difficult to transfer from like an ad hoc NAVA, Skylight, to 18F and USDS, and how we feel about those organizations? I would say that having experience in this problem area, whether it's at like a fancy tech firm who contracts to work on this, or as somebody who's benefited from those services. Like I recently spoke to somebody who wants to work on, I keep thinking about food access and had food stamps. I would say those are both really important tools that during an application process, depending on how much you're comfortable sharing, means that you have direct experience and insight that other people won't have. Those organizations specifically, I would say that the firm itself doesn't really matter. What really matters is the transparent competitive process. So for example, I can't even remember who won this, but 18F once forced people who wanted a big government contract to submit, instead of a prospectus that was hundreds of pages long about how they would complete the project, they had to submit code in an open repo and work there in an agile way using a publicly documented API. And a very large, very famous federal contracting firm, lovingly referred to as the Beltway Bandits, literally wrote in the public GitHub repo, we are unable to use this API that is publicly documented. And a bunch of itty bitty firms that I had never heard of before built really interesting and beautiful things. So I would say it doesn't like hurt your brand if you work at one of those firms. I would say if you worked at that firm and you wrote like weird fluff or like silly speeches or were rude to the administrative assistant who works with you, like that's not great. But like if you built stuff that helped people, that's amazing.
Sherry,
Yep. Plus one to that, there's a lot of, there's a whole ecosystem. While it's still new and it's still growing, there definitely is. So the Digital Services Coalition companies, they're companies, for-profit endeavors. There are lots of nonprofit organizations or outfits that also deliver services, especially around issues like food assistance and things like that. So Civilla, 1 Degree, Code for America, Benefits Data Trust, et cetera. So there's a whole bunch of what we might lovingly call the .orgs. There's a bunch of the .coms, whatever they're actually called. And to Erie's point, as long as you're able to demonstrate you can do the work, that's what people will be looking for when they're coming to hire you. And there's, and even if you were, doing that work inside one of the other category of .coms, those large Beltway bandits, again, it's about demonstrating that you can do the work and showing up to provide your services to the public. So.
And then Sharon, maybe we can answer this one as the last one and we can wrap up since we're right at time. Sherry asked, how do you see government catching up with the speed of tech as it applies to evidence in court proceedings? This is such a big question. And I want to go back to a couple things. One, the government is with all sorts of contradictions, right? There are some things that seem much slower. There are other things that have completely surpassed private sector tech, right? We're able as a government to enable work in space. I know there's SpaceX and et cetera, but it requires the government entity to actually enable these contractors to do all this work. There's DARPA, there's, again, like originally the electronic health record. So there are some cases where the government itself surpasses tech. And then we can also question if we want to move at the pace of tech. There's that too, because as Erie knows, who is at the Federal Trade Commission, I don't know, Erie, you want to talk more about that? We may or may not want to move at the speed of tech because we have a responsibility to a lot of people. And I want to turn it over to you, Erie, because I think maybe your thoughts on that.
I just thought that was a great answer. I'm trying to search quickly, but there's an MIT report called the poverty of algorithms, and it talks about how tech in a bunch of legal contexts is really difficult to be cross-examined by a public defender, for example. So I would say, to Kathy's point, I'm less worried about like, well, we gotta hurry up and match tech, and thinking more thoughtfully about, not that your question wasn't thoughtful, but like, instead of focusing on the speed, focusing on like equity and justice, which sometimes takes a long time.
Thanks, everyone.
And one more thing on that, sorry. So that is so critical and so true. And yet there's also a lot of opportunity in the judicial branch to kind of bring it apace with what we can do. So we're really excited to see the open access bill this week that would make publicly available court records actually free and publicly available. And so there are things like that where we can infuse a little bit more of our data and tech talent in the judicial branch to really up-level the way that it operates and the way that it functions, to increase access, to increase fairness. And I think we're excited about those possibilities and want to consider how we can supercharge that in some of the ways that the executive branch at the federal level has been plugging away for many years. The legislative branch is really getting on board. We do want to bring our judicial branch along, but there are lots of important considerations in all of these places.
Thank you, everyone. We are going to share out the recording. We'll also share out notes. We'll figure out which parts of the chat we may share out. Thank you especially to Nigella and Haley for making sure we're on top of everything, all the questions. And just thank you for everyone who chimed in, all you experts out there who joined. You already know how to do tech in government. You joined anyway to help everyone answer all these questions. So thank you for just, being part of this community, and we'll send out more details after this. Any final thoughts? Thank
you. Yeah, just a huge thanks. We are just a few of the many, many, many who are part of this big ecosystem of people who care about better public services and using our data and tech skills to get there. So we are throwing open the doors and want to welcome in any and all of you. We have so much work to do. And while we love to have a little fun with it, it's serious, important work, and we need more awesome people to help us.
What they said. Have a great day.